Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Monday Morning Tennis Rant. I'm going to talk about Davis Cup and some of the great matches that took place. But before I do that, I want to discuss a post that got a lot of traction from Dolgopolov, who you might know. He competed during the Big Three era, and he said something very interesting. He compared the level of play now on the ATP Tour compared to back when he played. And he said that Sinner and Alcaraz are very close to the big three in level, maybe a little bit more inconsistent. The level between 3 and 15 is weaker compared to his era. The level between 15 and 50 is about the same, and the level between 50 and 100 is stronger now than it was back when he played. And I agree with this 100%, and I've heard other former players say similar things. Now, when it comes to the third ranked player and the 15th ranked player being weaker than in the Big Three era, this part of this post made a lot of headlines, and they often didn't take into account that Alex actually said that guys between 50 and 100 are stronger than they used to be. So let me just share my opinion, how I see the tour now versus the Big Three era. And I hate comparisons between Sinner and Alcaraz and the big three. And often people say that Sinner would smoke Federer off the court or he would destroy Rafa, and Alcaraz would absolutely destroy Federer and Nadal on any surface, even on clay. And I do find that, first of all, disrespectful, and it's something that we'll never know. Okay, so we have to respect the history of tennis. But the way I see it, and this is something that I talked about in my tennis levels explained the video, there is a GOAT level. These are the greatest players in the history of tennis. And Sinner and Alcaraz are absolutely at the GOAT level. They're going to be remembered as the greatest tennis players of all time, together with the big three. Are they better than the big three? We don't know yet. We have to wait. Maybe 10 or 15 years from now, we can say that, yes, Sinner and Alcaraz, or maybe even both of them, are better than the big three. We don't know. Let's see how they're going to play. But one thing that has to be taken into consideration is the fact that players between 3 and 15 are not as strong as they used to be in the big three era. Do I see anyone ranked between 3 and 15 in the world right now going deep in a Grand Slam tournament? Well, only if Sinner and Alcaraz are not playing or they get hurt. But if they have to go through one of these guys to get into a final of a Grand Slam, I don't see it happening, quite frankly. And we can't forget that Djokovic is still there. He made 4 consecutive semifinals at the Grand Slam level in 2025, and he might do that again in 2026. So, no doubt about it, the level of play between 3 and 15, not as strong as it was in the Big Three era. And that has to be taken into consideration when we look at the Sinner Alcaraz results. It doesn't mean that they're not good, they're unbelievably good. And again, I equate their level to the level of the Big Three. I'm not making any arguments that they're weaker. We have to wait and see what their careers are going to look like 10 and 15 years from now. But what I'm saying is that whatever titles they accumulate in these next few years, you have to take into account that there's not the same type of competition that they're facing if you want to make comparisons to the big three, because their competition was way tougher, and the competition in the 90s was also incredibly tough, but that's another topic for another video. Now, I've said multiple times in my videos that the level on the WTA Tour is better than it has ever been, and I'm also going to say that the level on the ATP Tour in the lower ranks is better than it's ever been. So it's absolutely true that it's a complicated situation where, yes, the level of play is way better than it used to be. If you take a look at the players ranked below 50 in the world, and if you go all the way into the challengers, those guys are unbelievably good and better than previous generations, and same for the WTA. But when it comes to players taking big titles, going all the way, this is where, in my opinion, players are not necessarily worse when it comes to forehands, backhands, serves, athleticism. They might even be better. But in my opinion, it's the mental game that holds them back from going all the way. And the guys at the top, Sinner and Alcaraz, are not only better in all aspects of strokes, forehand, backhand, serve, return, But Sinner and Alcaraz are also players who are going to find their best tennis when it matters the most, in the most important stages of tournaments and in the most important stages of matches. And it's for those reasons that we have such a discrepancy between the top two guys and everybody else on tour. I am going to say that I still enjoy watching Davis Cup. Not as much as I used to before, but I still am a big fan of the event. I was glued to the TV last year when Rafa played his last match during Davis Cup. And I got to say, the 2025 Davis Cup was one of the best ones that I've ever seen. It features some of the most exciting matches this whole year. That tiebreak in the semifinals between Italy and Belgium, Cobolli versus Bergs, that went 17-15 for Cobolli. One of the best tiebreaks of the year. The whole thing took 27 minutes. And you got to feel for Bergs because he had 7 match points in that third set tiebreak, and 3 of them came on his own serve. And I think the one at 15-14 that was on his own serve, he, on this particular point, hit a huge first serve and had a relatively easy forehand as the first ball in the rally, and he decided to do a drop shot. I think he should have blasted his forehand because he was blasting in this tiebreak, playing spectacular tennis. Bergs is such a great player. And Cobolli, being one of the fastest guys on tour, this guy is such an exceptional athlete. He ran that drop shot down so fast and redirected it cross court. And then the next 2 points, I had the feeling that Bergs had regrets, and he ended up missing a relatively easy forehand on the next point, gave Cobolli match point on his serve, who delivered an absolute bomb down the tee and won this semifinal tie for Italy. So an absolute clutch performance from Cobolli, who played spectacular tennis, but also a great performance by Bergs. And he was distraught after this match, of course. This was such an important match, and anytime you play for your country, it hurts even more to lose. But Bergs' dad made a very touching post on X, and that was very nice to read. Now, this wasn't the only interesting tiebreak during this Davis Cup tournament. In the other semifinal, Spain against Germany, we had Struff playing against Carreno Busta, and Busta won the first set, and Struff was up 6-1 in the second set tiebreak. Now, mind you, this is indoors on hard court, and Struff, a very aggressive player with a great serve. So 6-1 tiebreak. Carreno Busta wins both points on his own serve. The second set point was a long rally, and Struff had some chances. And at 6-3, the announcer said, if Struff loses this point, this tiebreak could get interesting. And it turned out to be extremely interesting because on the first set point on his own serve, Struff played a tight point from the baseline, and he started slicing his forehand, was doing squash shots, and wasn't taking a lot of risk. And you can see that he was a little bit tight on this point, that he ended up losing. And now it was set point at 6-4 Struff serving. And Jan Lennart wanted to play aggressive on this point, and he did. Hit a huge forehand cross court, and then went for a winner inside out with his forehand and missed it by about this much. He then unfortunately completely lost confidence in his forehand and committed 4 forehand errors in total. Once he was up 6-1 in a tiebreak, he ended up losing this tiebreak from being up 6-1 to losing it 6-8. So tennis can be an absolutely brutal sport, and the tiebreak, with the combination of playing in Davis Cup, can produce some tightness in the players. Now in the final between Italy and Spain, Berrettini won his 3rd consecutive match during this Davis Cup tournament. He was rock solid, didn't even drop a set, playing great tennis. And Cobolli playing against a Munar who's been on absolute fire. The biggest surprise to me in this Davis Cup was the fact that Spain took out Czechia in the first round, who has a stacked team. Menchik, Lehečka, and Mahac. In my opinion, these guys can win the whole thing. And they took out the USA in Delray Beach to qualify for the final playoff tournament. But Munar was able to take out Lehečka, which was a big surprise. And Spain, without Davidovich Fokina and Alcaraz, ends up taking out Czechia. Huge surprise to me. Not a big surprise to see Germany lose in the semifinal to Spain. Zverev played well in this Davis Cup, won both of his singles matches, and even beat Munar, who's been on absolute fire, in straight sets. But it came down between Germany and Spain to the deciding doubles match. And German players in Davis Cup, in my opinion, feel even more pressure because apart from Zverev, who's not really affected by this, German players don't get a lot of respect in the German media. And I think when they compete in Davis Cup, they feel additional pressure and they generally don't perform that well in team events, especially in Davis Cup. Again, I'm excluding Zverev from this, who's a Olympic champion and does play well in Davis Cup. But in any case, Germany, who has a great doubles team, ended up losing the doubles point, which meant that it was going to be Spain versus Italy in the final. And Italy, for the third consecutive year, wins the Davis Cup. Again, Berrettini, rock solid, wins the first point, and then Cobolli, and an absolute thriller, takes out Munar 7-5 in the third. Munar was playing so well in that first set, took it 6-1, but Cobolli showed the level of player that he is. I think he can go quite far in the rankings. He is so explosive, so fast. He actually has a very good serve, very good kick serve, can bring the heat on the first serve. And the explosiveness from the baseline, when he decides to start playing aggressive, he can bring the heat. And Munar, playing exceptional tennis, wins the first at 6-1. Maybe Cobolli was feeling the nerves a little bit, but he fought back and toughed out the second set 7-6 and then won the third set 7-5. And again, Italy wins Davis Cup for the third time. I did not think that they were going to do it because there were some good teams this year in Davis Cup, and especially when you play without Sinner and Musetti and Arnaldi, and you are so deep. There are so many great players in Italy. Italy is by far the best tennis nation in the world, and they've proven it because they're absolutely dominating Davis Cup.